Welcome to the North Central Region Aging Network webinar series, NCRAN for short. We are a group of extension professionals made up of gerontologists and aging-related experts. We work together to offer professional development opportunities to extension staff in the North Central region. Each first Friday of the month, we have this webinar series. It's live at 10 a.m. Central Time or available as a recording. My name is Suzanne Bartholome, and I'm an assistant professor and extension state specialist at Iowa State University. Today, I'm going to be providing an overview of Iowa State's Finances of Caregiving program. Part of the Aging Network's strategic plan is to increase awareness and knowledge of our programs across the North Central region. We would like to identify opportunities for multi-state collaboration and implementation. So this month's webinar highlights one of our network members' programs, Iowa's Finances of Caregiving. So today's presentation will be in three parts. First, I'll provide the background and rationale of the Finances of Caregiving program. Part two will be an overview of the program format and content. And the final part will be a presentation of the program evaluation results. Many of us have personal stories about caregiving. And the former First Lady, Rosalind Carter, provided great insight when she said that there are four types of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. A family caregiver is someone who provides unpaid care for an adult loved one who is either ill, frail, elderly, or has a physical, mental, or emotional disability. Care might be shopping for groceries. It might be personal care acts such as bathing. It could be taking their loved one to the doctor's office. About 17% of American adults are currently family caregivers. So caregiving permeates family life, impacting all of us, which is why it's an important topic for this webinar and for the program. And even though caregiving permeates family life, many people are in denial about the potential need for care. Most people will need long-term care at some point, but there are about 60% of people, according to research, that are convinced the need for care will never happen to them. So a study found that more than half of caregivers and care receivers reported that just prior to the moment when care was needed, they had not considered the need for long-term care. That they did not think it was a real possibility. So if you think about that, that's 60% of people are facing a caregiving situation and they hadn't even thought that it was a real possibility. That same research found that of those who did consider that they may need long-term care, 75% had not made any plans for the caregiving situation. So when they were asked why, most reported that they didn't want to talk about it, that they didn't want to admit that care was needed, or they said they simply thought that they had more time. I think an issue is that family members, and according to this research, family members don't feel qualified for the job of caregiver. They feel like they don't have a strong foundation in decision making, and when it comes to trying to care for an aging loved one, there's just a sea of confusion because of the overwhelming amount of information from whether it's home modifications or healthcare. It just is can be overwhelming. So the Finances of Caregiving program responds to this evidence that people are not planning. And so the idea of the program is to help people prepare for caregiving, and ideally it will help mitigate stress and negative impacts of caregiving. So let's talk about how caregiving can negatively impact health and well-being. You can see from this bar chart from a 2018 report called Beyond Dollars by Genworth that caregiving is associated with higher rates of depression, stress, resentment, and diminished relationship quality. Again, the premise of the Finances of Caregiving is that is to provide planning strategies to help reduce these negative impacts. And you can see there are lots of negative impacts. An aim of the Finances of Caregiving program is to help people prevent people from being caught by surprise from the caregiving situation, so that caregiving isn't done in the middle of a crisis. During our piloting of Finances of Caregiving in Iowa, we asked our participants if they had experienced any hardships as a result of caregiving. And you can see that almost half experienced stress, a third lost sleep, more than a third had less time to take care of themselves. And our Iowa numbers closely mimic those national numbers. The final number there at 18% reduced their spending as a result of caregiving, which is where our program really focuses. Now, there are negative impacts as seen on this slide and on the previous slide, but I want to make it clear that the majority of caregivers experience positive feeling about their caregiving experience. They report appreciating the opportunity to care for a loved one. They're proud to be able to help their loved one. So I don't want to paint a negative picture about caregiving, but there are some real costs that are associated with caregiving. For most families, they slip into informal caregiving. There is no planning that happens ahead of time. And remember, I said that family caregiving is typically unpaid, which is why little thought is given to it, let alone planning for caregiving, because it's free. Many caregiving decisions, as I said, about healthcare, home care, housing needs, it can be overwhelming, but it can be very costly in terms of the financial costs. Caregivers will spend on average about 20% of their income on caregiving activities, which can really cause a financial strain. Caregivers most commonly will pay for household expenses and medical expenses, and most caregivers don't really plan or anticipate for these expenditures. And they end up sacrificing their own spending. So they'll cut back on their own personal spending to be able to make up for the costs for their caregiving. And more significantly, and really the point of the Finances of Caregiving program, is that caregivers may be jeopardizing their own financial futures, especially if they reduce their retirement savings, which you can see from this slide that 63% were paying for care with their own savings and retirement funds. Almost 50% reduced their base quality of living, and 42% reduced their contributions to their own savings. And so this is where our Finances of Caregiving workshop steps in. Another real cost of caregiving is the impact it has on a caregiver's career and livelihood. This bar chart is also national data from that same Genworth Beyond Dollars report, and it shows the various impacts that caregiving has. Caregivers end up working fewer hours, they lose vacation or sick time, they have repeated work absences, and they miss career opportunities. Not shown here is that some caregivers have to leave work either permanently or a temporary leave of absence. Some will go from working full-time to part-time. Some will give up working entirely. So moving in and out of the job market and work behavior of this nature as a result of caregiving is really what we want caregivers to think about, is what is that financial impact does it have on you? So the Iowa State University's Finances of Caregiving program was developed in 2015. It's based on What Every Adult Child Should Know, which was a program that was developed in 2005 by Celia Hayhoe, who was an extension specialist at Virginia Tech. She had funding from the National Endowment for Financial Education to develop the program, and NEFI for short. So NEFI is the owner of the copyrights of What Every Adult Child Should Know. Iowa State received permission from them to use this resource as a basis for our program. So we obtained a copy of this guidebook, as you can see on the right, and we took it from there. We developed 5 sessions and adapted it with information for Iowa. We also obtained copies of the videos that are an integral part of the series, and I'll talk a little bit more about them as I tell you about the program. The target audience is not limited simply to those who are caregivers. We do get people who are in the midst of some fairly complex and stressful caregiving issues. But in our marketing or promotion of the program, we really work to reach people prior to the point of crisis or real need. So we're looking for people, we're trying to include people who are looking ahead and realizing that sometime in the foreseeable future, they may need to take on a caregiving role. So that 75% of caregivers that I talked about earlier who said they recognize that it is a real possibility that they will have caregiving as a possibility, but they have not planned. And we also try to include people who are aware that they may sometime be in need of care. So ideally, we would have caregivers or future caregivers come to the workshop with their care receivers. And that does happen sometimes. We've had, frequently have had multiple caregivers from the same family participate together. So for example, we've had 3 siblings who worked together to care for a parent who came to a program. We had a 99-year-old mom who took the program and then went and invited her daughter to come back and take it with us a second time. We price the workshop to encourage multiple members of the same family to attend. So the price is the same whether one person or three to four people from the same family do attend. Based on our program data that we collected during the pilot, you can see that most of our participants were currently primary caregivers or had been past caregivers. We don't always reach our target audience. What we have found is that a lot of aging professionals will come to this program and healthcare professionals because they want to be better prepared to help their clients. And so that wasn't really something that we anticipated when we designed the program. In terms of the program format, as I mentioned, there are 5 lessons in the Finances of Caregiving, and I'll talk about each one in turn just to give you a flavor of what is in each session. But the concepts that cut through all of the lessons, I want to share with you first. And so what we really conceptually or in terms of objectives try to instill with our participants is the importance of planning ahead, particularly why the care receiver still has the capacity to sign legal documents. We emphasize the importance of involving all family members so that the care receiver's wishes are clearly understood. We also emphasize the importance of discussing financial information of the care receiver so that a family can assess what funds are available to pay for care. Many people are pretty unrealistic about what the cost of care is and how different government programs like Medicaid work for long-term care, and so that's an important aspect of the program. We also, as a concept or objective, emphasize the importance of discussing all the different types of care that are available before making any decisions. And finally, as I mentioned earlier about the vulnerability of caregivers, we emphasize the importance of having a plan in place to protect the caregiver's retirement if the caregiver has to leave work or reduce their hours. The program is offered in a face-to-face format, and it is also there's also a hybrid version. So the first session and the last session is in person, but then the 3 middle sessions are offered in the Adobe Connect platform. But more often than not, we prefer to have a face-to-face program offering because of the camaraderie and group dynamic that builds among caregivers who are present at the program. So lesson 1, understanding your starting point. In this session, we encourage caregivers to really start thinking about their financial situation and getting a snapshot of where they are, like what their starting point is. So we want them to start gathering important documents and paperwork so that they can understand what their financial standing is. So we ask them to create a balance sheet for their household. So what is their net worth? We also ask them to complete a spending plan. And the spending plan has a couple of different scenarios in terms of the caregiver situation of whether they are planning on working full-time, working part-time, and having an adjustment, a column to adjust that situation. So the objective of session 1 is for the participants to really recognize the benefits of early planning and including all key members in caregiving discussions. And by digging into someone else's finances, we know that can be a sensitive thing to do, but so are caregiving discussions. So that is another key part of the program, is to really help people think about the communication challenge. And a way that we do that is early in the lesson, participants are introduced to a family that is experiencing what it's like to have not planned ahead. So it's a video with a mom, well, it's a video of 3 siblings discussing the sister who is taking care of the mom. And they had not done any planning, and it's a bit of a contentious conversation, and the video typically will stir a lot of emotions and generate a lot of stories from our participants. So that's the first video that we show during session 1, and then we show the video which has the same, a different approach to the same problem. So in the second video clip, the care receiver is a part of this scenario and has an opportunity to express her wishes basically about her caregiving. And you can just see that the outcome is much more positive and less stressful. So it really provides, I think, a good illustration of what can go well when you have planning, or when you have planned. Lesson 2, why it's essential to plan, does just that. It shares why it's essential to plan ahead by having all of your legal documents in place that a care receiver may need. So those financial and medical decisions, when those are necessary, then you have the legal groundwork, such as your power of attorney for healthcare and finances in place. Session 2 covers a lot of terminology that might be new to participants. It also begins with a video. So this time our family's gathering with a lawyer. And so here is where a lot of our participants start to get more questions, and that's a good thing. They are also start to get a better understanding of what they don't know and what questions they need to be asking, either of their aging parent, of their loved one, or a lawyer. And again, our program is set up with Iowa law and regulations and resources in mind. Lesson 3, don't forget about your retirement, summarizes the financial decisions family caregivers need to consider. So what happens to a person's retirement and financial cash flow if he or she leaves the workforce to become a caregiver? If a caregiver continues to work, what services would be available? What alternative work arrangements might be needed? And is their employer flexible enough to allow a variation in work hours or family leave? So really the objective of session 5 is to help participants recognize the ways that caregiving can impact a caregiver's long-term financial well-being, and to equip them to protect their financial future. Again, they watch a video during this session, and in this scene, the family discusses some of the documents that were covered in sessions 1 and 2, and they begin to talk about possibly compensating the caregiver. Lesson 4, paying for care, is a summary of resources that can be used to pay for care. Includes an overview of long-term care insurance, veterans benefits, Medicare, Medigap insurance, and Medicaid. And so the objective of session 4 is for participants to identify options for meeting long-term care needs and covering the costs. In lesson 4, participants start to look at what care costs, and so we go into um, providing all sorts of figures on what is the cost of adult daycare and nursing homes by the day, what would you anticipate to have to spend in those areas. We then go into the different resources that could be used or combined to help pay for care. So government care in particular, or rather government programs in particular, is something that we like our participants to understand, like the fact that Medicare typically doesn't cover long-term care. Um, so we also very briefly include some information about reverse mortgages and life insurance options. Lesson 5, effective communication. The objective is for our participants to learn some effective communication techniques for discussing difficult information and just for approaching a difficult conversation. So really we try and talk about how would you bring up the subject with your care receiver or with your loved ones about about the costs of care, about what the arrangements are. And we know that there's a whole spectrum or continuum of how people feel in terms of their comfort level of talking about this sensitive topic. This session also will include a panel often of at least one or more guests from that are local service providers. So we might have somebody from legal aid, from the area agency on aging, or an elder law expert. So that really helps participants build their awareness of what available resources there are in their community, and it allows time for some really quality Q&A. So in part 3 of the webinar, so what are the program results? In terms of our reach, as I said, we developed the program in 2015, and so we've been at this for about 5 years, and we've reached over 400 people at this point, and have had at least, to date, 36 programs. And we have had some really successful partnerships with area agencies on aging. We have worked with hospitals. Our Aging Services Coalition typically will promote our program. We've worked with different support groups like Parkinson's groups and Alzheimer's support groups, and have had members from those groups join us for the program. We have a fairly strong relationship with the University of Iowa and Iowa City through their HR department, where we offer the program to their faculty and staff through their wellness program. We have an excellent success. Well, we have a great relationship. One of my educators at the Meskwaki settlement in Iowa, and the program has been warmly accepted there. And we also have a really strong success and partnership with some African American churches in the Waterloo area. So since 2018, we've had over 50 people through the Jesse Cosby Community Center, which is a multicultural, multi-generational service provider. And so we're really pleased with that partnership. So some of the motivation for why people come to the program: one person said, I'm getting old and I need to pay attention to my financial situation, and I don't want my departure to be a difficult situation for my family. And I think that really, as a theme, is fairly common in terms of what we're hearing from our participants, is they want to make sure that everything is in place for their family members, so that when they leave, they don't leave behind any kind of, they don't want to make it difficult for their loved ones. In terms of another motivation, like I said, we don't always reach the target audience that we plan for, and that we do get professionals that come to the program. One person wrote into their evaluation that, I work with the seniors, I decided to enroll so that I can give information to them, which will be helpful. And so really it's more of a professional development or enhancement approach to taking the program rather than personal. In terms of our program evaluation results, we have, our results are based on a matched t-test, a matched pre and post test, and so it's a self-assessment of program engagement, confidence, knowledge, actions, and behaviors. And in terms of the evaluation, we do see positive results that our participants are in fact moving forward and gathering their financial and legal information that they need for caregiving decisions. They also report increased understanding of caregiving related issues that their family needs to consider. And the participants who are currently in caregiving mode seem to be able to be undertaking some cooperative planning with family members as a result of the series. And so we've had some, I think, pretty strong results. In terms of program engagement, we do ask them about how many classes they attend. And so, 5 2-hour classes is a bit of a time commitment. And you can see in the first column here that we have about 14% take 3 or less classes, but 86% of our participants will last through till the 4th or 5th class. We'll take 4 or 5 classes. In terms of the total number of hours spent learning, we asked that question of, besides, time spent outside of class gathering documents, maybe talking to service providers about long-term care or talking to a family member about caregiving, we have seen some success here. I think that about 63% spend 3 or more hours outside of the class really doing some preparation around caregiving, which I think is promising. In terms of, again, this binder and the set of different paperwork and documents that we encourage people to gather from start to finish, and really each session highlights a different form. Again, like whether it's a balance sheet or a spending plan, the percentage of work. So the idea is that by the end of the program, they will have everything in one place. So their list of medications, their list of service of doctors, and where things are kept. So the percentage of work that people put into completing these worksheets is fairly good too. So we have about 47% of our participants will complete 50% or more of the sheets, which is pretty good, because motivating people to engage in this type of work is can be challenging. Okay, in terms of behavior change, we asked our participants 9 questions about various actions from session 1 to session 5. So things like organizing financial records, estimating their net worth, taking steps to protect their retirement savings. And the results indicate that there was a positive change in all of the reported actions. The largest mean score gain that we saw was in organizing financial records and determining what long-term care services are available. In terms of another action is actually related to legal paperwork. So we encourage our participants to prepare their financial and health care power of attorneys paperwork, so that they set up wills, living wills, and again, that financial and healthcare power of attorney. And so we want, the bar chart to go up from left to right, from red to yellow. And in all cases, there is a little bit of an increase there. So that is for caregivers, and then we see similar results among care receivers. In terms of program satisfaction, 79% of our participants were very satisfied with the program quality. And if we put just satisfied in there, 97% were satisfied with program quality, and 66% were very satisfied with the relevance of the program material to their needs. And if we combine that with satisfied, that's actually 96%, which I think is strong. These are pilot results and in terms of the participant overall experience, and 98% would recommend the program to others. 99% agreed that the knowledge and skills they learned were useful, and 99% agreed that the program improved their understanding of finance and caregiving issues. So in conclusion, Iowa's Finances of Caregiving program is effective in helping caregivers and care receivers. It's a focused program tailored to financial issues related to caregiving. It includes planning strategies and information about funding long-term care. Caregivers are utilizing the information and skills gained from the program to increase their positive financial actions. And ultimately, the participants find the program topics, resources, and educators valuable. I want to give a shout out to the team, my team of family finance specialists in Iowa who deliver the program. And as part of this team, there's a subgroup who make up the work team. So Brenda, Mary, Joyce, and Barb developed and launched the program with me and we continue to work together on the program. So thank you for joining me, and if you are interested in learning more about the program, if you have questions, comments, please reach out to me. My contact information is here. And once you've viewed this webinar, be sure to complete a short evaluation, which is on the NCRAN website as a link next to the webinar link. Save the date for next month. The June webinar is going to be a presentation by Cheryl Eschbach from Michigan State, and she's going to be talking a bit about her the university, or the Michigan State's University's model of health extension. And so this is a model that focuses on increasing primary care patient referrals to enroll in extension-led health programs. And I've seen a presentation on this before, and I think you'd find it really interesting. So it'll be either a face-to-face, rather a live session, or it'll be a recorded webinar. So you just have to check back at the NCRAN website. And that concludes our webinar. Thank you.